This is a crew of American YouTubers where whatever they touch turns into pure horsepower. These guys pretty much live and breathe cars. In this video, we're gonna watch the rebuild of the fan favorite, a 2018 Nissan GTR R35. But before we get this show on the road, make sure to hit that subscribe button because honestly, we keep growing thanks to you guys. Cop this car from a Copart salvage auction. The GTR, especially the R35 model, is pretty much the ultimate all-rounder. Back when it first dropped in 2009, they called it the Super Nissan, and it's still in production to this day. Over the years, it's gone through several facelifts and some seriously major upgrades. It's always had a reputation as the Japanese rival to the Porsche 911. It packs a twin-turbo 3.8-liter V6, and officially, Nissan underrated its power. But with aftermarket tunes, this engine can easily push a reliable 1,000 horsepower. Chassis design and the drivetrain are absolute gold. It features a 6-speed dual-clutch transmission made by the German company GTR, but they mounted it weirdly far back at the rear of the car. It's a bit of an odd setup, but it helps perfectly balance the weight and boost traction. Everything in this machine, from the suspension to the steering and how it puts the power down to the wheels, is designed to blow your mind. A brand new one will set you back about $100,000. Now let's take a walk around this wrecked beast. The front bumper is completely ripped off and the bumper cover is smashed to pieces. Surprisingly, the grille and the emblem are still intact, but the real nightmare is in the driver's side suspension. Looking at the side of the car, the door is dented, and the rear quarter panel is severely buckled and cracked from the inside. Most of the airbags have popped, and the worst part is, the hidden damage is gonna be even harder to deal with. Even covered in dirt and totally wrecked, the rear end of this car is a pure masterpiece. He's gonna pull the emergency brake and roll the car off the trailer. The front left wheel is completely loose and wobbly, so getting it into the shop is gonna be a massive struggle. Luckily for him, the passenger side airbag didn't deploy, or maybe there wasn't one installed in the first place, because replacing that usually means tearing out the whole dashboard, not to mention pulling the seats and the steering wheel first. Up front, the dent in the aluminum hood can probably be PDR'd, paintless dent repaired, but the fender is clearly a goner and needs to be replaced. The headlight bracket is busted, but the engine and all the top-end systems look okay. Still, there's no way to know for sure until they actually fire it up. He notices that one of the fender mounting brackets is completely bent outward. From another angle, you can see the body frame crumpled like an accordion from the impact. That's a scary sign that the frame might actually be bent. He peels back a rubber seal covering a metal seam in the engine bay and finds it totally bent. He goes to take off the broken wheel, but even with the lug nuts off, the wheel is completely seized and won't budge. Looks like the control arms and tie rods got smashed into each other. The rim here is completely obliterated, not just cracked. The brake rotor is rusted out from sitting around and is completely loose and rattling. He unbolts the inner fender liner from the inside, then removes the shield covering the other half. He takes out the top fender bolts and a whole row of bolts along the side. The fender is so badly crumpled that it's wedged back into the door frame, so he sets up a puller to yank that piece out of the way and gets the mangled metal off the car. On this side, the upper control arm is fine, and the steering knuckle in the middle is actually okay too. Other than that, everything else is completely bent out of shape. The lower control arm is totally trashed. The inner and outer tie rods are completely snapped off. The sway bar link is totally mangled at the end. The strut mount is bent too, and the outer axle shaft took a hard hit. The body crumple zones did their job and collapsed, but that pushed the whole area about a centimeter back, jamming the door shut. This section will have to be cut out and replaced with a clean donor piece later. Next, he double-checks the turbo inlets to make sure no debris got inside and ensures all the hoses are tight and connected. He hops in to start the car, but she won't crank on the first try. He finds out that the mass airflow MAF sensor connector is unplugged. This engine runs 4 MAF sensors, 2 of them on the turbo intake pipes, and the unplugged one belongs to one of the turbos. He plugs it back in and tries to start it again. But still, nothing. He tries one last time, being careful not to burn out the starter. But it's the same story. The engine just won't fire up. Gets in touch with the previous owner to ask about the engine's condition and if there was a known issue. That's when he uncovers a mind-blowing secret. This car was actually built to push 1,000 horsepower. We're talking bigger turbos, massive injectors, a heavy-duty fuel pump, a billet crankshaft, the whole 9 yards. He knew from the auction listing that it had some aftermarket parts, but he had no clue it was a 1,000 HP build. And here's why the car won't start. It's all because of the fuel injectors currently in it. After the wreck, the previous owner swapped out the massive aftermarket injectors and put the stock ones back in. Because of this, the car's ECU is refusing to start the engine due to the lack of fuel and the custom tune still on it. So now, he's gonna have to buy a set of 6 injectors which cost $800 with a flow rate of 1300 cc of fuel per minute. Just to give you some context, the stock injectors max out at 550 cc per minute, so these aftermarket ones have pretty much double the capacity. Now, cc stands for cubic centimeters, which is just a unit of volume. But to put it into perspective, 1 cc of gas weighs slightly less than a gram. This means if you run these injectors at full blast, they could easily drain the entire gas tank in under 10 minutes. He's gonna unscrew the 4 bolts holding the lower cover to get it out of the way, and then remove the mounting bolts for the intake manifold, which is made of aluminum here. Next, he'll disconnect the dual throttle bodies from both sides, exposing the intake runners for the V6 engine underneath. He'll unbolt the fuel rail from the feed and return lines, pull up the fuel distribution pipe, and swap out the old injectors. The blue ones here are the stock ones, while the black ones are the upgraded aftermarket ones. He'll seat each new injector into its cup, plug in the wiring harnesses, and put everything he took apart back together. Time to fire up the engine again. You can hear the fuel pump priming. He hits the start button, and the engine finally roars to life. Now he's gonna start cracking the lug nuts to swap out those busted suspension parts. They need some serious torque to loosen up. He's gonna need a socket larger than 30, hammer it on to get a solid grip, and pull out the bent axle. The inner CV joint is completely obliterated. He'll pop off the retaining clip using snap ring pliers, unbolt the tie rod end, and with one solid tap, it pops right out. Moving up, he'll disconnect the upper control arm and pull out the steering knuckle along with the brake rotor and caliper still attached. Next, he'll unbolt the strut fork from the bent lower control arm and take out the upper strut mounting bolts. With a pry bar, he'll separate the two, disconnect the sway bar link, and pull the strut assembly out. He'll try to pry out the inner axle cup, but it's jammed tight. Still, he manages to pop it loose using a slide hammer. He'll back out the lower control arm mounting bolts, which are probably the longest bolts on this entire car, and with a quick tap, the arm slides out the other side. He'll spin the inner tie rod and take out both the inner and outer tie rod ends as one unit, then install the brand new ones. He'll slide the new axle into place, torque down the bolts, mount the new lower control arm, and bolt the new coilover back in before putting the rest of the brand new suspension assembly together. He spent the entire day grinding on this suspension, but it's a crucial step. Without it, there's no way he'd even be able to move the car. He gets a brand new wheel with a 20-inch rim and bolts it on. The steering wheel still has a nasty wobble to it, but he'll look into that once everything is fully bolted down. He fires up the engine again, but it stalls after a rough start. He gives it another shot, and this time it idles smoothly. Finally, he puts it in gear, rolls the car out, gives it a solid wash, and drives it over to the frame alignment shop. He starts by removing the side curtain airbags. The door isn't latching properly. He gets the car up on the frame pulling machine and jacks it up. He pulls off the side skirts from underneath and hooks up the clamps to pull the frame back into spec. From the inside, he unbolts the front door hinges. Honestly, there's only one real way to fix a mess like this: cutting out the damaged frame section and welding in a fresh donor piece. The outer body panels don't matter as much. It's the structure underneath that counts. He pulls off the weather stripping, grabs his angle grinder, and starts cutting into the rear quarter panel. He cuts out a square section from the bottom, grinds down the metal tabs, and with a slide hammer, he pulls on the wheel well frame. The outer body damage is actually way more pushed in than he initially thought, so trying to save the original inner structure is gonna be a massive pain and super expensive. Instead, he decides to use a donor rear quarter panel he had already bought. He'll start cutting from the roofline, remove the metal support bracket from underneath, and unbolt the door latch receiver from the inside. He'll then back out the rear bumper mounting bolts, crawl underneath to get the remaining fasteners, and pull the rear bumper completely off. Next, he pops the fuel door cover off and starts grinding around the fuel filler neck. He's cutting the section out so it doesn't snag on the rear quarter panel when he pulls it off. He traces the cut lines with the angle grinder, uses a flathead screwdriver to bend the sheet metal back, and yanks hard on the cut-out fuel door housing. Using a drill, he starts drilling out all the spot welds in the frame. He spends over an hour drilling and freeing the body pinch welds, then gives the panel a hard pull outward to separate the joints. The rear quarter panel is actually the worst place for a car to get hit, but it's still fixable. Finally, he rips the entire outer rear quarter panel skin off, exposing the primer gray inner structure underneath. Inner body shell here is made of multiple layers stamped together, with each piece acting as structural support for that specific zone. These panels are a mix of mild sheet metal and ultra-high-strength steel. You can actually see the different strengths of the metal on the factory body repair color map. The stiffest part of the entire car is the dual frame rails of the chassis, and the further you get from them, the thinner and weaker the metal layers become. What he needs to do here is strip this rear quarter section down to the bare bone, cutting through all these metal layers. He'll start drilling out all the factory spot welds with a spot weld drill bit. Every weld point is clearly visible here, so he'll spend hours drilling out every single round dimple in the entire area. He'll pry off the rectangular cover plate, and then the entire piece, even after. When separating it from the welds, that piece is still stuck on tight. There are areas where a drill bit just won't cut it because you're dealing with multiple layers of thick gauge steel. So, he brings out a specialized tool designed to shave and eat through those steel layers. Basically an angle grinder, but fitted with a heavy grit belt sander. Honestly, with a little patience, this thing works even better than a drill. He glides this belt sander along the entire frame rail, carving out a bunch of square notches all along the edges of the panel. He loops a fresh, coarse sanding belt on it to grind down the stubborn weld points holding the metal together. He pries open the door pinch welds, and from the top, he yanks the layer off with some serious muscle. Finally, it pops free. Quality of the sheet metal is what actually determines how safe a car is. A lot of cheap cars use super thin, weak metal layers to cut down on production costs. He's gonna repeat these exact steps on every single weld point. He cuts a small piece from the side, and then hooks up a frame puller clamp to yank the inner structure outward. He threads a bolt in to make sure the clamp gets a rock-solid bite, and then hammers away to pull the crumpled sheet metal back out from the side. He marks his cut line with some tape, grabs the angle grinder, and makes a clean, straight cut. This is a seriously exhausting area to work on. With a slide hammer, he starts working on a collapsed crumple zone on the outer side. Has to reshape the inner wheel well first. He removes the wheel and pulls out the massive inner fender liner. He secures a heavy chain to the damaged area, pulls it tight, and repeatedly hammers the surface to reshape it. Next, he unbolts the rocker panel support bracket, which is heavily spot welded almost every centimeter. It's gonna take some time, but it'll eventually release. He then hooks up a massive hydraulic puller to push the inner fender structure back out. He'll spend hours on this, grinding away at the crumpled metal inside. Since there are only 2 layers left here, the work is gonna be a lot smoother than before. Now, he shifts his focus to the clean donor rear quarter panel he bought. He smashes the glass since he won't be needing it, and uses a razor blade to slice off the weather stripping. He swaps in a heavy-duty carbide drill bit that can bore deep into the thick-gauge steel. He goes around drilling out all the spot welds on the edges of the panel. Step 1 is to separate the outer skin from the inner layers underneath. The steps are straightforward but definitely backbreaking, especially when you're doing all the hammering with hand tools since there's no fancy heavy machinery around. He uses a blowtorch around the inner wheel well. The heat expands the metal, making it way easier to pop the panels apart. Finally, he peels off the outer skin. Now he's gonna repeat the exact same steps he did earlier. He's only going to cut out the specific pieces he needs, because he has no use for the massive inner structure holding them together. He drills out all the factory welds, a process that absolutely eats through drill bits. He unbolts a structural support bracket, then the small reinforcement piece behind it, and finally, the exact large metal plate he needs from the outside. In total, he's prepped 8 different metal pieces of various sizes that he'll be needing. He bought some copper welding backing plates, grabs his MIG welder, and clamps the ground lead directly to the bare metal of the car. He clamps the panel in place with locking pliers and starts plug welding the drilled out holes. He places the copper plates behind the holes and welds them shut. He cuts the new rocker panel in a straight line at the end, and then cuts the section on the car to match those exact measurements. Pulls off the excess scrap metal, clamps a slide hammer, and aligns the inner rocker structure. He test fits the clean panel, and the fitment here is absolutely spot on, maybe just about a centimeter too long. He's got a great saying for this: measure 7 times, weld once. He scores the metal, marks the excess, and cuts it off the car's rocker panel. After removing the cut strip, he sprays weld-through zinc primer to protect the metal from corrosion and rust. Then, he grinds down the edges of the rocker panel on both sides where they'll be joined. Using vice grips, he clamps the panels together and starts welding all the seams, filling the holes using the copper backing plates. The genius of using these copper plates is that they create a solid backing layer for the weld puddle to sit on without sticking to the copper itself, making it easy to build up the weld for the top layers. He test fits the larger quarter panel piece to see how it sits, and it fits like a glove, completely OEM look. He tacks the panels together at key spots and spends a massive amount of time welding back and forth along all the seams. He fills every single plug weld hole, repeating these steps for all 8 pieces that make up the entire unibody outer skin of the rear quarter section. Next, he welds the seam on the side rocker panel, running the bead all the way to the bottom. He grinds down the welds from the top. Sure, some of these welds look pretty ugly, but some areas are way harder to weld than others. At the end of the day, structural strength is what matters, not cosmetics. Now, he hangs the outer body skin in place, and the car is finally starting to look whole again. He bought a brand new door, mounts it on the hinges without fully tightening the bolts, and double-checks the door gaps at the top. He preps and sands down the old metal surface, grabs a caulking gun loaded with heavy-duty seam sealer, runs a clean bead along the edges, and smooths it out continuously along the inner fender lip. He grabs the rear bumper and test fits it, and the alignment looks incredibly solid. He goes back to welding the rocker panel and moves on to the inner fender frame. He goes around plug welding all the circular holes perfectly, and then runs a weld down the entire length of the door pillar. He unbolts the trunk lid from its hinges and pulls the rear bumper off once again to weld the rear body panel seams from the inside. He took the trunk lid off because he needs to reach the tight spots inside. Every single weld point along the boundaries of the rear quarter panel has to be completely locked down and secured. He grabs the belt sander again. The belt sander to level out the weld beads. He's gonna go over the entire lower frame rail, smoothing down the pinch welds, and then do the same up top near the roofline. Now, he's got the seam sealer, which is used to seal the metal layers in cars. He runs a bead along the edges of the massive donor panel he just installed, trying to keep it as neat and consistent as possible, and then smooths it out with a brush. This step is honestly super satisfying because it's the final touch, and it's one of the biggest dead giveaways that a car has been in a major wreck or had its body panels replaced. On this GTR, it's painfully obvious that it got a rear quarter panel replacement. He's pretty much letting his inner artist out during this step. Honestly, cosmetics don't really matter here. The most important thing is the quality of the seal. Now he's moving on to the front end. He pulls the headlights out and pops off the plastic radiator shroud. He unbolts the oil cooler duct bracket, takes out the front crash bar mounting bolts, and slides the bar right off. Looking at the front, we can see the twin intercoolers for the turbos. He disconnects all the cooler piping and pulls both intercoolers out. Next, he unplugs the turbo intake pipes from the hood area, drains the coolant, and yanks the radiator out, followed by the fan shroud assembly. This whole section on the front left was completely smashed from the impact, so he bought a clean, used radiator core support. He test fits it to get an initial idea of how bad the frame damage actually is. The inner fender apron on that side is pushed back and sagged down pretty badly. He removes the new core support and secures the car onto the frame machine. He hooks up a heavy chain to the strut tower and pulls the upper and forward frame structure at the same time. Slowly, the collapsed crumple zones start to open back up. On this car, almost the entire structure is made of steel, except for the aluminum strut tower, and luckily, it's completely undamaged. He pulls it multiple times, adjusting the height and pulling angle. Once done, he cuts away the damaged section and starts preparing the fresh donor pieces he's gonna weld in. The car was sitting outside in the rain, so the interior floor is completely flooded, not just damp. We're talking pools of standing water in here. He cuts away the damaged side curtain airbag. This area is supposed to be bone dry. He unbolts the seatbelt pretensioner from the bottom. The entire interior is soaked, and all the floorboard cavities under the carpet are filled with water. It's honestly a bizarre sight. He unbolts a metal bracket housing the amplifier. This is the control module for the Bose sound system in the car. Water had pooled all over its connectors. He grabs a shop vac and starts sucking out the water, repeating this in every single floor cavity, and then mops up the rest with towels. Now he wants to find out what's causing that nasty steering wheel wobble. He pulls off the plastic steering column cover underneath and notices the play is coming from the bracket that mounts the steering column to the dash. There are 2 bolts on each side that slide into a dedicated track for the steering shaft. During the crash, this entire assembly pushed back about an inch or 2 because the car features a collapsible steering column system. In a front-end collision, the steering column collapses backward, pulling the steering wheel away from the driver incredibly fast to prevent injury. So all he has to do is slide the bracket and bolts back to their original position, and the wobble is completely gone, leaving the steering wheel rock solid. He swaps out the bent metal steering column trim cover that got warped in the crash. There are 2 release slots on the back of the steering wheel. He inserts a screwdriver, presses down, and the airbag module pops right out. He finds out that the airbag wiring connectors are completely melted into their sockets. He bought a brand new airbag, but he'll definitely have to replace those ruined pigtails later on. Next, he grabs the brand new side curtain airbags and removes the old, blown ones. They're held in place by some bolts in the middle and tensioned tightly at the ends. He installs the new ones along with their canisters. They're incredibly long, running the entire length of the door frame up top. He thoroughly cleans the floorboards, making sure everything is completely dry. He cleans the underside of the car too and sends the subframes to the machine shop to get them straightened out. He repairs the inner fender structure off camera, welding in a clean metal section. It's a massive piece that stretches all the way to the back. He jacked up the area and adjusted the ride height back to factory specs. He bought a brand new fender and an aluminum hood. He straightens out the bent metal seam under the hood, test fits the fender, and bolts it down from the top. He managed to get all the body panel gaps perfectly lined up. Most importantly, the door gap, which was making the door super hard to open. Getting these panel gaps flush is the ultimate sign of a job well done. Next, he orders some upgraded aftermarket turbo parts. He mounts the plastic fan shroud, bolts it down, and puts the radiator fans back in. These fans have thin plastic flaps that swing open at high speeds. He drops the radiator back onto its mounts and hooks up the coolant hoses. He bought a brand new, upgraded aftermarket intercooler because the previous owner had swapped the stock cooling system back in before selling the car. The intercooler has clear mounting points, but there are a ton of them. He mounts it at a slight angle and hooks up the charge pipes from the top. He installs the intake pipe and tightens down all the T-bolt clamps. He puts the front crash bar back on and torques down the bolts. The front-end design of the GTR is honestly menacing, and that massive intercooler sitting up front looks absolutely terrifying. He grabs a brand new front bumper cover, test fits it, and hooks up the headlights. He wires them up and they work perfectly. With that, the entire front-end assembly is completely finished, and this GTR has officially been resurrected from the dead. Next up, he heads over to get a wheel alignment. Now we've officially reached the body and paint stage. He's gonna take off the rear bumper, then the trunk lid, and unbolt the hood to get it out of the way. He'll pull the headlights, slide the fenders off, remove the roof molding, and pull the seats back out. He grinds down the weld seam on the rocker panel to make it completely smooth and flush. Next, he unbolts the brand new door and pulls the window glass out, mixes up a multi-stage body filler Bondo, and applies a clean coat over the welded areas on the rocker panel and all the exposed weld joints. He preps and sands down the entire door frame area and cleans the inner side of the hood. He chose white for the paint, matching the car's factory color. He sprays only the inside of the hood, paints the door jambs, hangs the fenders, and shoots the inside of them as well. Usually, paint booths are completely sealed to keep out dust and debris, but this guy is literally painting in the open air. He lays down multiple coats on every single piece. Once he's done with the bolt-on body parts, he moves on to the chassis itself. He blocks down the body filler on the quarter panel and goes over the primed areas multiple times. He tapes off the body lines and masks the areas he doesn't want painted. Then, he sprays the entire rear quarter panel area, laying down paint over the body filler, the seam sealer, Felito, and the mounting bolt holes. A good paint job can hide almost any bodywork flaws. He peels off the masking tape once the paint dries, and now that the chassis is done, it looks completely factory spec. He hangs the hood and the door back on the car. He gets the seatbelts back after getting them repaired, along with the driver's seat upholstery, which had ripped open when the side airbag deployed. He mounts the seatbelt pretensioner at the bottom of the B-pillar. He does a thorough deep clean on the entire interior, puts the fenders back on, and bolts them down. After that, he reinstalls all the small trim pieces. Finally, it's time to take this beast out for a test drive. He turns the key, but she doesn't crank on the first try.
Hey! I just killed on accident.
Luckily, on the second attempt, the engine fires right up.
There you go.
The weather is super rainy, which honestly makes for a perfect dramatic test drive. He turns off traction control and tries to pull some fast donuts. But he feels something grabbing the wheels and kicking in to boost traction. Then, he does a straight line pull. Even at 80 mph, the car doesn't pull to either side. The steering wheel is dead straight, and the alignment is completely spot on. After driving for a bit, all the warning lights on the dashboard disappear. The only thing not working is the infotainment screen, because if you remember, its amplifier unit was completely flooded. But once he cycles the ignition, the screen boots up normally. The screen displays the water temperature, oil temperature, engine oil pressure, and brake fluid pressure. But the real showstopper is the boost gauge. This thing is pushing 1.5 bars of boost, around 22 psi, which is insane, easily more than double the stock boost. Every time he drops the hammer, the torque is absolutely mind-blowing. The car has some serious torque steer because of all that massive power.
Why does that pop up?
Since it's an AWD, all-wheel drive monster, it launches incredibly hard from a standstill. He throws it into R mode, race mode, and wraps out the gears. The RPM red line hits right around 7,500, and the rolling acceleration is even crazier thanks to the massive upgraded turbo. The spooling sound of those modified turbos is incredibly loud. Just watching the footage, the performance is terrifyingly good, so you can only imagine what it actually feels like sitting inside that cabin. He keeps doing pulls until he's had his fill. then heads back to the garage to install an aftermarket oil catch can. He bolts the mounting bracket directly to the engine block and secures the catch can. It features 4 lines. 2 lines pull the oil blow-by vapors from the valve covers into the can. A third line recirculates clean air back into the engine's intake tract. And since it's a V6, the can has a 4th line acting as an oil drain back to the oil pan. But he's still not fully satisfied with the passenger side body panels. He decides to redo the front fender and the passenger door. He marks the areas on both the new and old parts and strips the paint down to the bare metal. He starts pulling and shaping those panels, tapping on them to get the surface perfectly flat. He grinds it smooth with a belt sander, shoots a coat of primer, and finishes it off with some thin layers of body filler. He sands the Bondo down until it's completely flush, because the panels that are getting painted have to be laser straight. He gives the car a thorough wash and preps the entire body for paint. The whole painting process takes him several days to get a truly professional finish. Finally, he installs the brand new rear windshield glass. Looking at the front end, this GTR looks incredibly mean and aggressive, even in clean white. Once again, this monster is officially back on the road. I know you guys were probably waiting to see this GTR get strapped onto a dyno, but he didn't film a dyno run. The previous owner sent him a dyno sheet showing the car makes a whopping 970 horsepower, so he took his word for it. And honestly, the car's performance speaks for itself. As of right now, this is officially the most powerful car we've ever covered on this channel. And that's a wrap, guys. Let us know in the comments which car model you want us to build or talk about next.
Why does that pop up?